Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. My name is Celine Bondoc. I'm a service designer, and I've been working on innovating the patient experience at Mayo Clinic. But before I get into that story, I want to set the mood. I'm going to play some sounds, and I want you to think about what you're hearing and how it makes you feel. Now, I want you to imagine the following scene. Today, you are a neurosurgery patient. You arrive at the hospital before dawn and check in. As you are being prepped in the pre-op space, anywhere from 4 to 15 people come to check on you. They tell you about your procedure, ask you questions, mark your face, and give you anesthetic through many, many needles. As you doze off, you are wheeled to a cold, bright room filled with equipment, tubing, drapes, monitors, and more people. They position your head in a metal frame to hold you in place. Once prepped, your surgeon makes an incision, drills through your skull, exposes your brain. Good thing you're still asleep, right? But then someone pulls out an iPad and asks you if you can read a few sentences about this bird. The strangely surreal scene I've just described is a very, very high-level description of what happens during an awake craniotomy. During these complex procedures, the patients remain awake so they can provide critical, real-time feedback to their surgeons. But one thing you may have noticed is that for the most part, my description didn't focus on what the patient was feeling or needing outside of clinical needs. In healthcare, we often focus on getting the clinical procedure right, but we pay less attention to the patient experience because we really haven't had to before. That is the second half of the story I'd like to tell you. A few months ago, the neurosurgery team reached out to us to innovate this experience. Like most surgeries, it was originally designed for patients who would never have to see or hear anything in the OR. However, the team knew that the clinical outcomes of these awake procedures were good and hoped to have an experience to match. We started with a literature review to understand this patient experience, but all we could really find was that it was described as tolerable. But what does tolerable mean? From our perspective, it could mean pain management, outcomes, or how the patient handled being awake during the procedure. This was our opportunity for innovation. It can be easy to jump to conclusions about what innovation actually is. Many times, it's only associated with a technical outcome. But at CFI, we can't simply assume that. In this case, we asked ourselves what it would take to have an awake procedure that was as preferable or even more preferable to that of an asleep patient. We started by trying to understand the current experience. So to get that picture, we observed procedures, we shadowed clinical appointments, and interviewed patients. We also talked to as many of the staff as possible, and some of the opportunities we unearthed pointed not to tech solutions, but to supporting the patient's basic human needs. Medical technology has come a long way, but in the moment, our patients have the same needs that our friend over here had when he had his craniotomy centuries ago. This new procedure can save lives, but it's still confusing and scary at times. Patients just want to feel cared for, heard, and occasionally distracted. In healthcare, we provide patients and families countless papers and videos of information before procedures, and these help. But when a patient is at their most vulnerable, when they've completely surrendered control to our staff and our surgeons, sometimes the thing they need is someone next to them to hold their hand, to encourage them, and to tell them what that sound actually is. Now that I've shared the importance of connection and communication, I'm going to play the same sounds again that I played at the beginning of my talk. But this time, I'm going to tell you when I'm going to play them, and I'm going to let you know what they are by showing you a picture on the screen. So I will now play the first sound, which is not a monitor, but the sound of riding an elevator for a few stairs. I will now play the second sound, which is not the sound of clanking surgical instruments, but of regular forks dropping into a sink. I will now play the last sound, which is not a pump, but that of a child blowing up a balloon. As you can see, with some communication, the confusing sounds at the beginning of this talk make more sense and are actually much more harmless than they may have seemed. Though a patient will likely hear monitors, instruments, and pumps during their procedures, they may benefit from someone being at their side and being their eyes and ears in the room. These small steps can go a long way in keeping the patient comfortable and calm during a frightening procedure. At the end of the day, being sick is a human experience and should be met by human connection. This is the type of human-centered innovation we hope to bring to awake craniotomies and really to all patient experiences here at Mayo Clinic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let me throw a total monkey wrench into what you just said. The idea of talking to 14 doctors before a surgery in the morning, as you described,
yes.
Terrifies me, not because of the procedure, but because I'm an introvert and I don't like talking to people in general. My mom would tell everyone their family history. She's very outgoing. I'm not. She's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. What about those personality types? Even that desire to talk, is that something you measure for? Is that something you account for? Or is that even an untested piece of real estate in what you're doing?
Well, tested for. When patients come in, we are very aware of the fact that this is going to be a stressful morning for them. We want to do our best to prepare them about what's coming. Telling them in a pre-op meeting that these are the people you'll encounter. Hopefully this is what they'll ask you. And so it leaves not a lot up to chance in that moment. We do try to shepherd our patients through that situation as calmly as possible.
Well, when I'm in a barber chair, I don't like it when the barber talks to me. My mom would love it. So I mean, I think there's an interesting thing to be talked about, even about just how much you even want to talk about. So it's all very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It was great to see you. Celine Bondoc, everybody.